Welcome to Sober.Coffee, a weekly coffee chat sharing experience, strength, and hope for anyone on the sober road to recovery. You can download Sober.Coffee weekly on all podcast platforms and check us out on Instagram at Sober.Coffee Podcast and on Twitter at Sober.Coffee Pod. To learn more about us and to help support these sessions, visit online at Sober.Coffee. Here are your hosts, two guys on their own path of recovery, Mike and Glenn. Let's join them at the coffee shop.
I got a problem, dude.
Uh-oh.
I got a problem.
Again? Another one?
Yeah. Well,
Fourth one today.
I'm a little jacked up on caffeination today.
Oh, my gosh.
Yeah.
How bad? Well, first of all, full disclosure.
Yes.
We're in the studio in the evening tonight.
I know.
We are normally 6 a.m.ers.
Yeah.
But, we scheduled an evening one, so you probably had 17 coffees, and you have a 45 ouncer in front of you right now.
Well, it's funny because on the way in, you said I probably drink a gallon of water every day, and I said so do I, but it's just divided in 20 cups of coffee. That's So yeah, I'm super excited. So you combine the caffeine with the topic we have today, and it's really got me cranked up. It's good stuff.
That's awesome. So what's the topic for today?
Yeah. So we're in the middle of a series.
Love series.
Yeah, and
season 2, right?
We're in season 2, and we're putting a series together that looks at alternatives or augmentations to our background, which is in 12-step recovery, right? I mean, but we're wise enough to know that we're not the only path to sobriety. And I loved how you said it on the anniversary special, the 1-year anniversary special, when you said, we have one goal, and that goal is to point people towards recovery and sobriety, right? We don't have the only answer here.
Yeah, so I mean that really came out of over the last year connecting with so many people, on social media and hearing their stories and the guests we had, and they just struggle with sobriety, and some of them are sober curious,
right? And
they hear about all these different programs,
right.
and some are anti-AA, some are for AA, and our story, we were very successful with the 12-step program,
right?
Period. I've tried other ones.
And I don't mean to sound this flippant, but good for us. Good for you, dude.
Absolutely, but we are pro-sobriety.
Pro-sobriety.
And if somebody did not get sober because of with the 12-step program, they got sober with another program, amen. I'm high-fiving you, man. I'm cheering for you.
It's our way, just not the only way.
Right.
So that cues me up there for our guest today, Mary Beth. And
Hi, Mary Beth.
Yeah, she's joined us in the coffee shop, and she's joined us virtually from California. So we're touching all parts of the United States. But Mary Beth is with an organization called LifeRing, and I'm not even going to do it. I'm not even going to do it justice.
You're not going to try, are you?
No, I'm not going to try. I'm going to give it over
Mary
to her.
Beth, that's a good thing.
Yeah, right. So, yeah, Mary Beth, LifeRing. Tell us a little bit about LifeRing.
Yeah, welcome.
Yeah, welcome.
Well, I really appreciate you guys having me today and the opportunity to share for your listeners the LifeRing Secular Recovery. I'm going to lead in a little bit with my just personal story to tell you why it was important for me to find multiple paths, as it is for some of your listeners. I went into rehab in 1993 when I was 32. I'd been an IV meth addict, and I had like a 20-year drug history at that point. And in my mind, I'm going into treatment for medical treatment. That's what I was going for. And I was very surprised when I got there to find out that the only recovery option they were offering me was 12 steps. And 12 steps was not going to work for me. I'm an atheist. I didn't agree with the powerless idea. I wasn't thrilled about the focus on defects. But they told me that it was the only way, that I either accept a higher power and work the steps and agree I was powerless, or I was going to fail. They told me this literally on the first day that I entered rehab. And I looked at them and I said, this doesn't seem like a good plan to tell me I'm going to fail. So it was a problem. And I really had to stand back and decide, what the heck am I going to do here? I'm paying these people, these supposed experts, and they're offering me a plan that won't work. And so I decided that I was just going to keep my ears and my mind open and listen for ideas that I thought would be useful and just ignore everything else. And so that's what I did. And it was still a struggle and a challenge because there was a lot of pressure on me to conform. And of course, I was afraid. What if they're right? You know, they're scaring me. Maybe I'm just wrong and they're right. And so it was an unfortunate and unnecessary hurdle to my recovery that they put in place.
And how long were you in this prison of only one option?
I was inpatient for 5 months.
Wow.
And it was also, to be honest, when I went to 12-step meetings, they were telling me the same thing, that
Sure.
I had to, basically I had to comply. That was the only way.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I was there for 5 months. And so when I got home after that time, and remember, this is 94 now, so there is no Google.
No, oh boy.
But I decided, let me go to the library and see if I can find some options. And it turns out there were.
So
even
in the Dewey Decimal System, you found a solution.
I found options. And so I found Women for Sobriety, which still exists. And I believe you'd be talking to them. I found SOS, and LifeRing broke off of SOS in 97. And I found Rational Recovery, which is now basically SMART. And so I was very relieved to find that there were other choices. And I just continued to do what I had, which was pull the ideas from all of the programs that I thought would be useful to me and apply them. That's what LifeRing today would call building a personal recovery plan.
Okay, so just to put things in context. So at the time LifeRing existed or didn't exist, SOS existed, or
Correct.
Okay,
correct.
SOS existed, but LifeRing didn't yet exist.
LifeRing didn't yet exist, but the philosophy
But the philosophy was there.
similar. And
Okay.
LifeRing started in 97, and I did SOS meetings as well as the other programs. This is like 94, 95.
Okay.
But the philosophy is similar, although the idea that LifeRing has, one of the fundamental concept is the personal recovery plan. That terminology didn't exist. That idea wasn't really there, but that's what I did. I built a plan that worked for me. And I now have 28 years of consecutive
Well, that's
sobriety.
amazing. That's fantastic.
Yeah,
Mary Beth.
congratulations, by the way. That is fantastic. So it's funny because what my brain stopped. AA was developed off of another program called the Oxford Group, right? So
Yes.
so it wasn't like they had this revolutionary concept. It was borrowed as well and framed from the Oxford Group, and so LifeRing, it was kind of born from the basic philosophies of SOS. Am I getting this right?
A lot of there were similar ideas, although we've updated our materials and the research. We try to stay modern and on top of the science as it evolves, and we've adjusted the program over time. So it has some similar ideas, but it is different. Okay. And you want me to tell you a story about LifeRing?
Absolutely.
So LifeRing the philosophy is based around what we call the 3 S's. And the S's are sobriety, secularity, and self-help. And so by sobriety, LifeRing means clean and sober from all drugs, including alcohol, except that it is permissible in LifeRing to take drugs that are medically indicated and taken as prescribed. And that includes medication-assisted treatment for substance use disorder. That's considered sober as long as you're taking it as prescribed.
So that would be like a Suboxone?
Yes. It can also be things that people take for anxiety or pain. We don't get between a member and her doctor. It's up to them. So if there's a medical reason for it and the doctor's given the stamp of approval and it's taken as prescribed, that's consistent with sobriety and LifeRing terms.
That's great.
LifeRing talks about sobriety also in a metaphor. We talk about the sober self and the addict self. And we talk about how everyone, of course, that has a substance use disorder is very familiar with their addict self, but that really, even in the deepest depths of addiction, most of us have a sober self, a part of us that wants to be sober, wants to be our true self, wants to be our whole person, and that we can strengthen our sober self by making positive choices when we're faced with a decision. That every choice that you're faced with, you can either sort of make the choice that's going to make you more miserable or lead to chaos. And that's what your addict self wants, because if you're miserable, you're more likely to keep using. Or you can make the positive choice that's going to strengthen the sober self. And as you make positive choices and you implement them, the sober self gets stronger and stronger. And over time, it becomes the dominant part of you, and the addict self sort of gets beaten down. And that's a metaphor we use to think about what long-term sobriety looks like.
Okay, great. Now, that's part of the sobriety sector, not necessarily
Correct.
the self-help sector?
That's the sobriety. That's part of the S sobriety S.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
great.
And then the second S is secularity. And so out of respect for all faiths and none, there is no religion in the meetings. Now, many LifeRing members have personal, religious, or spiritual beliefs. It's actually a large percentage of them, but it just doesn't come into the meetings. It's not viewed as, well, we know it's not a necessary part of recovery. And so if any of the listeners have concerns about that, I'm sure you're aware there was a study done by Sarah Zemore, the POW study, which looked at the effectiveness rates of AA, LifeRing, Women for Sobriety, and SMART, and found they're all basically equally effective. And so what LifeRing focuses on is in trying to make sure that people know that they have options so that they can make the choice that's right for them, because we believe that will increase the likelihood of success.
Okay, awesome. That's awesome. So that brings us to self-help.
Yes. So self-empowerment, LifeRing teaches that your success in recovery is based on your own motivation and your own efforts. You are not powerless, but you actually need to fight for your recovery. And we also have that fundamental idea of personal recovery plan, that everyone's plan is going to be unique to them. And part of the reason we emphasize the personal nature is because people come into recovery in different places, right? I mean, some people may have destroyed themselves professionally, but still have relationships, and someone else that can be the opposite. A lot of people have mental health struggles, or like me, they have trauma histories. They have different personalities, different belief systems, different learning skills. And so with a plan that's going to work for me, it may not be the right plan for you. It's individualized.
So Mary Beth, how do they create this plan? Do you help guide them through this creation of this personal recovery plan?
Because, if I could jump in, I had, full transparency, I had developed many personal recovery plans that were designed by Glenn, and they didn't work.
Right. So do you help in that?
Yeah, and I'll say, and I designed one that worked for me, and it did work, right? And so it depends on what's a good system for you. For some people, they like the structure of the 12 steps, and I'm happy if they find a good place there. But for others, this is the better option. And so we do help people. We have a workbook. It's called Recovery by Choice. And the workbook is broken into 9 areas of life. We call them domains. And they're things like your current exposure to drugs and alcohol, feelings, preventing relapse, your activities. And because it's an individualized plan, we're not telling people what to do, but it's got checklists and suggestions and worksheets. It's an analytical tool. It helps people go through these areas and do the analysis and really do careful thinking about where they are, where they want to go, and how they might get there. And we also do offer workbook meetings through Zoom, so that people who want the structure of doing it as part of a group, there's an opportunity for them to do that as well.
So do you have like sponsorship the way that the 12-step program does, or no?
We don't have sponsors. And when I talk about that, what I point out is that there are really 2 roles for a sponsor, right? One is working the steps. And so we do have the workbook, and we do offer people workbook meetings where they can work through the workbook with others if they like. The other main role of a sponsor is that relationship, right? The mentoring relationship. And we don't have, I'm sure you're aware there's pros and cons to sponsorship, right? And so we don't offer formal sponsorship, but certainly in meetings, people develop personal relationships. And I convene a meeting in my local area. We had a sheet with the numbers of regulars who were willing to give it to newcomers so that they could call if they needed. People go out to coffee, they go to movies, they go bowling. Those personal relationships do get developed.
Yeah, and I think that's so important, and I'm glad you brought that up, because, and I can see how it plays out, because I'll go into meetings, whatever program I've go to meetings. And you're right, I establish relationships with people who become my support network. You know, they're my encouragers. They'll point me in the right direction. So they're informal. They're not sponsee relationships, but they're as important to me in my. So this recovery by choice is that. So this is a membership just like Alcoholics Anonymous, where anybody who has a desire to recover can be part of LifeRing, right? So, right. I mean, it's not a membership. You don't signing up for it, right? Or how does that work?
That's right. It's a peer-to-peer support group,
Peer-to-peer support.
Similar to 12
Okay.
steps. Meetings are open to anyone. We do, we pass the hat as you do it at your meetings, or ask for donations. We have.
Do you give away free coffee? That's really my key question.
That's all Mike wants to know about.
I've never seen a meeting with free coffee.
Okay, all right.
Well,
So
then.
So how does one get can somebody do this on their own without the meeting? So can they get the Recovery by Choice book and kind of work this on
the
their
workbooks.
own? The workbook, yeah.
Right.
So through Amazon, you can get all of our books, and we have the workbook. We also have our basic text, which is called Empower Your Sober Self. And that goes into the science of substance use disorder, much more depth than I did here today about the 3 S's and the sober self versus the addict self and the personal recovery plan. We also have a book called Humanly Possible, and that's a book of stories of LifeRing members with long-term sobriety that they got the secular way. So because LifeRing has the idea of an individual recovery plan, it can really give people examples of the different ways that people have approached their plan and what's worked for them.
All right, this is exciting. So the first book was called Empower Your Sober Self?
Correct.
Okay, and we'll put links to this in our resource room. And then the second book was Humanly Possible?
Yes.
Okay. And so we're going to put links on, but for people who don't go to our site, which is Sober.Coffee, by the way, where can they go to get either those resources or find out more information about LifeRing?
Sure. And the third book is the workbook, Recovery by Choice.
Yeah,
yes.
Gotcha. Okay.
And so LifeRing, of course, has a website, lifering.org. There's a lot of information about LifeRing. There are worksheets and pamphlets. They explain our meeting format, which is very different from a 12-step meeting format.
Okay.
So for us, we have a format of how was your week? We focus not on drug history, but on current events. And so for in a LifeRing meeting, what you're talking about is what happened last week that you want to talk about related to your recovery? And is there anything coming up in the next week that you'd like to talk about here in the meeting? And LifeRing meetings are intended to be smaller so that everyone has the opportunity to share, although of course they can pass. And also the LifeRing meeting has crosstalk. So people can talk directly to each other as long as it's positive or neutral. And the convener does watch out to make sure that's true and to make sure everything stays on topic.
Okay, excellent.
Yeah, I really, and I just pulled up on Amazon the Recovery by Choice workbook. I mean, the thing I like about that is there's, it's very structured and analytical. So, no, it looks great.
Yeah, no, this is really good stuff. What would you recommend somebody's first choice be, or for next logical step?
So for me, I always suggest that anyone who's interested in looking at their many options, that honestly, if you go to the websites of the different organizations and you read up on them, I really think that for most of us, 1 or 2 are going to sort of call out to us. These sound like my people. This philosophy sounds like something I would be comfortable with. And so my suggestion is always try a few different meetings of those organizations and just see if it's a good fit. And also, just like with 12 steps, different meetings have different personalities, right? So it's always good to try a couple of different meetings.
Yep.
We also do have some specialty meetings through Zoom, like for veterans, dual diagnosis, women's meetings, LGBTQIA+, things like that.
And those are all on your website. They can connect to Zoom meetings. Excellent.
Correct. The schedule is all online at lifering.org. Both the face-to-face, and we have starting to go back somewhat to face-to-face and the Zoom, and we will continue to have Zoom in significant numbers, even after more meetings are face-to-face, because a lot of members prefer it now that they've had that experience.
Isn't that true? I mean, yeah,
Yes.
people like the convenience. They like they're
Like me.
Yeah. So, I mentioned at the beginning, I'm all caffeinated up and I'm all juiced up about this, but I want to slow down and be quiet for a minute and just give you a couple of minutes to just talk to the person who's struggling right now, who maybe has listened and isn't ready to jump in. They just give them a little guidance.
I would say that there are some other differences that might be of interest to people. Our meetings are less regimented than some other programs. For example, the opening and closing statements are optional for the conveners, but you also do not have to identify yourself as an addict. You don't have to agree you have a disease or a disorder or a habit, and you don't have to track time. These are all decisions that we view as individual. If these are useful to you, then we hope that you will do them. But for some people, they're not useful and we don't require them. Many members do these things, but not everyone. So there's more flexibility and more choice even at those levels. For me, I think the most important thing is that to understand that even though LifeRing is an abstinence-based organization, and we do understand that people aren't always 100% committed on day one when they walk in the room. So it is okay in a LifeRing meeting to talk about that early ambivalence or lack of certainty, or 1 week you're really feeling motivated and committed and the next week you're not so sure. Those conversations can happen and no one is going to be looking at that as problematic, even though in the long run, we are abstinence-based. The other thing I would say is that the crosstalk can be really helpful in that establishing relationships, right? People are going to be supportive. For example, if you have a challenge coming up next week, you can tell the group, like, say I'm going to a work event with alcohol for the first time. You can ask for suggestions and people will tell you, here's what worked for me, and get ideas. Now, you get to decide which ideas will be helpful for you, but it can still be really valuable to get the group to sort of, pitch in and give you some suggestions that might be useful. So there's a lot of developing of the personal relationship and a lot of talk about a conversation. If you have a relapse or a slip, we view that as a learning opportunity. And there will be a conversation about it if you want one. Looking back, were there any signs that you missed? Or what were the specific circumstances that happened, so that if you identify them now, what's your plan for when that happens next time? So all of these conversations happen at a LifeRing meeting.
That's excellent. Now let me peel the onion back one more layer, and then we'll let you go. But so Mary Beth in 1993 went to the library, did the Dewey Decimal System, and did some research. So talk to me about Mary Beth of 2022. What would you recommend somebody do? How would they Google search their investigating recovery? What resources do you say are go-to that aren't LifeRing specific necessarily, but what steps would you guide somebody to?
I mean, the fact that they have internet access to it makes it a lot easier. If people are considering options, the largest options are LifeRing, SMART, Women for Sobriety, and then Recovery Dharma is a Buddhist approach that some people like. The other thing I will say is you don't have to pick just one. Many LifeRing members also attend other programs, and that is absolutely okay in LifeRing. If a member thinks that going to both SMART and LifeRing or both 12 steps in LifeRing is going to be the best assistance to them to help them build the strongest recovery plan, LifeRing supports that 100%. So you are not required to make an exclusive choice when you walk into LifeRing rooms.
You don't sign a contract, huh?
You do not sign a contract. No one is going to think it's odd if in a LifeRing meeting you say, I heard this thing at a 12-step at AA last week, and I thought it was useful and I wanted to share it with the group. That will be considered perfectly normal and appropriate. Right. And so it's really about, our focus is on helping the member build her sober self and helping her increase her odds of success, whatever that looks like for her.
I love it. And I love your passion. Yeah, you could tell that's experience.
You can feel it.
Yeah, you can feel it. Your experience is talking. It's worked for you, and maybe it'll work for somebody else, So that's great. Any closing comments?
I just encourage everyone to check us out, and I really appreciate the opportunity to tell everyone about LifeRing today.
Yeah, we appreciate your time.
Thank you
We
very
really
much,
do.
Mary Beth.
Yeah, you have a great one.
Thank you.
All right,
Thank
check
you
it
very
out.
much.
All right, bye-bye.
Bye-bye now.
Thanks for joining us for today's coffee chat. To contact the show, email us at podcast@sober.coffee. If you need immediate help, the AA hotline is 800-839-1686. The National Suicide Prevention Hotline is 800-273-8255. Remember, Mike and Glenn are sharing their own journey on the path to recovery. Any suggestions, medical or otherwise, are their own experiences and should not be viewed as professional advice. See you next week, and remember, there is a solution.